so today we're going to make our French horn sleeve. French horns are unique among brass instruments because they have to stick their hand in the bell. So we actually make a sleeve for that. So we have the opening here that will go around the bell, and then the wristband that they stick their hand through so that they can play the instrument with their arm in the band. So that's our finished product. In order to do it, like the other ones, we're going to have the 3 layers of our outside cotton, flannel, and inside cotton. And it's a fairly simple cut. It's cut on the fold. So when it's opened, it has this kind of odd looking shape. You can kind of see. But you cut it on the fold with, on the bell end, on the long end, it's 19 inches. Along the top, it's 22 inches. And the top is the fold, that's the 22-inch mark. And then it's 6 inches along the short end, which will be the sleeve end that goes around the wrist. So 19 on the long, 22 across the fold, and 6 down the short side. And then in between the 6 and the 19, I just cut this kind of bell-shaped curve. So when you're constructing this, you want to open up your outside cotton and your flannel. That goes down in the stack next. The flannel and the inside cotton are cut 20 inches along the fold instead of 22, so that we have the channel for the drawstring like we did for the woodwind instruments. There's an extra 2 inches at the top on the long end of the outside cotton. The inside cotton then goes on top of the sandwich, on top of the flannel, and it's the same size. It's also 20 inches from the sleeve to the bell. After you've laid out your stack, and you've matched up the curved edges and the short edge of all 3 layers, and you've pinned along the 2 curved edges just enough to hold it together, we're going to make the drawstring channel. Okay, on the long edge, we're going to make a drawstring channel. So we're going to fold the end in about 1/2 inch or so, 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. Fold the top down, again about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Hopefully you can see that. You finger press, and then you fold it over again just so it catches the top of the inside layers. And then you pin. Tucking in the ends like that just gives a nice finished edge for your casing. Then do the other end the same way. Tuck in the end, fold the top down, and then down again so that you're just catching the layers of the 2 inside layers, and put a pin in there, and then do the same. Work your way along the entire length, folding on the top and folding it over so that we have a drawstring channel made at the top or at the bell end of our sleeve. Kind of like making a rolled hem, except you're leaving a gap at the top for the drawstring to go through. And then we're going to sew that channel down, and we just want to catch the bottom of it, just to secure it, and leave the ends open so that we have the nice tunnel for the drawstring to go through. So we're going to start at one end of our drawstring channel where we have it tucked in and tucked under, and using a straight stitch, we're going to stitch just along the edge about 1/4 to 1/8 inch seam allowance, making sure we're catching all 3 layers in there, but we're leaving that nice opening here for the drawstring to go through. And just sew that straight across all the way to the other end. And as you get close to the end, just make sure that the end is tucked under so that we don't have raw edges showing when we turn it right side out. And just back stitch as you finish. I'm going to trim our threads. And there we have our drawstring channel. So that's where the drawstring is going to go in to secure it around the bell. The next step is to fold the sleeve right sides together, so the outside cotton on the outside. Match up that drawstring channel that you just made, and then match up along the curved edge and pin the whole thing together, matching up your edges all the way to the short end. And then we're going to sew along this entire curved edge, leaving this bottom end, the short end, we're going to leave that open and leave the edges raw. We're just going to sew starting from there all the way up to that drawstring. Use a straight stitch and a 1/4 inch seam allowance. As you get to that top drawstring channel, you're going to sew into it just a little bit, just across the stitching that you had done. Just to make sure that's secured, but that we still have left our ends open for the drawstring. So now our last step is to add a wristband to the top sleeve part that they're going to stick their arm in. So we're going to use our quartering method to add the wristband. Now, to add the elastic band at the top part of the sleeve, we're going to quarter the seams, which means you fold it flat. We've got the seam on one side, that marks 1/2, and the crease where we fold it in half marks the other. We're going to put a pin there to note that. Then we're going to fold it in half the other way, matching up that seam and that pin. And then where the folds are on this side, we'll put 2 more pins. Now we do the same thing for the wristband. Fold it in half and put a pin at each fold that marks the halves. Fold it in half the other way, matching up those pins. Put a pin in each half, and that marks the quarters. Doing this, putting it together this way, allows the smaller elastic wristband to stretch to the larger hole evenly across, since you only have to stretch 1/4 at a time. So then we're going to match up that pin with the seam. Match up the opposite one with the opposite pin. And then match the other two pins. So you end up with a pin at every quarter going around both the wristband and the sleeve. So it looks kind of like that. And as we stitch it, we're going to be stretching between the pins. We stretch until those seams meet. We're going to sew that with a 1/4 inch seam with a zigzag, and we're going to hold that stretch as we sew across. Stretching the wristband open and kind of pulling it back till it matches. Slide it under your presser foot near one of the first pins and put your needle down to anchor it, and then remove that pin. Now make sure the edge of the hole matches the edge of the elastic band. Use your left hand to kind of hold the layers together and hold them stable. And use your right hand to stretch that elastic and to pinch the fabric together. And then just ease it through until you get to your next pin. Stop it with the needle down. Remove the next pin. And rotate the thing around, holding it, slightly pulling with your left hand, and your right hand is stretching that elastic. And you move on to the next quarter. And finally the last quarter, we're almost around. And backstitch when you get back to where you started to make sure it's anchored securely. Pull it off and you trim your seams. It kind of looks a little weird from the inside, but then when you turn the whole thing right side out, it looks like the sleeve of a jacket. So the final step will be to add the drawstring in the top. The final step in making the French horn sleeve is adding the drawstring. I'm using a length of paracord, but you can use a shoelace, you can use bias tape, rope, pretty much anything that is strong enough to go through the channel and pull it snug. You could even put elastic in there if you prefer. I've also have one of these spring toggles that I'm going to put on the end of the paracord. You can also you don't need to use these, but I use them just because it's a little easier for the kids to adjust around their bell. The last thing I have is a safety pin. Again, not absolutely required. It just makes it a little easier to feed the drawstring through the channel. So I'm going to attach my safety pin to the end of my drawstring, and I poke it in one of those holes on that channel we made, and then I'm just going to feed it through. You can use the safety pin to just kind of pull it, and that's where it comes in handy. It's just something to grab as you pull it through. Once you've got it all the way around, get that pin just coming out the end. One little tip there, if it does get stuck in here, which it might because you tuck those ends in, you can use a pair of tweezers to reach into that hole and grab it and pull it out. Mine came through fairly easily. So then I just kind of even out the ends, remove that safety pin, Oh, I didn't so much eat it out yet. And then you poke the two ends, squeeze your toggle. This is a 2-hole toggle. They come in with single holes as well. And again, you can just tie a knot if that's easier, or if you don't have these available. But this holds it so that it can be adjusted, the tightness. But then I do tie the ends into a knot so that they do not pull back through that toggle. So then they can snug that up. And that is how you make the French horn sleeve. Thank you very much.